Chapter 1, 19 That year, standing like a lackey. The hot afternoon sun cast its warm glow upon the Hokage Tower, gilding the aged structure with a golden hue. Inside Hokage's office, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, swiftly flipped through the documents on his desk. Graduates of the Ninja Academy, Year 46, and vacant positions in ninja teams. He carefully examined the strengths and weaknesses of each genin, forming balanced teams while selecting the most suitable Jonin instructors. The past 2 years had seen an increasingly unstable shinobi world. Frequent small-scale conflicts between villages had led to significant casualties among Konoha's ninja squads. Hiruzen knew well that properly structured teams were vital for increasing mission success rates, survival odds, and overall combat effectiveness. Whether to prepare for an inevitable war or simply to ensure the safety of his subordinates, he had to approach this matter with the utmost caution. After over an hour of meticulous revisions, he double-checked his drafts multiple times, confirming that this was the best arrangement he could devise. Then, he began summoning Jonin one by one. Chozakichi, Shibi Aburame, Minato Namikaze, Akaku Yumino, Koto Mokume, Yoken Mimura. And finally, Shino Yamanaka. Before he knew it, dusk was approaching. When the next knock sounded at the door, Hiruzen looked up at the last Jonin on his list for the day. He was a young man, around 18 or 19, standing just over 1.8 meters tall. His well-trained physique was lean yet sturdy. Golden blonde hair complemented his sharp, handsome features. If it weren't for the deep black circles under his eyes, making him look perpetually exhausted, he could have easily caused many Konoha girls sleepless nights. Good afternoon, Lord Hokage, Shino Yamanaka greeted, raising a tired hand in salute. After staying up training until late last night, he had barely managed to nap in the afternoon before being summoned to the Hokage Tower. This was just too much. Shino, you should allow yourself to rest once in a while. Training will be more effective that way. Hiruzen was well aware of Shino's relentless training regimen. Unbothered by the young man's nonchalant demeanor, he simply offered a word of advice before getting straight to the point. After discussions with Inoichi and Shikaku, we've decided to reassign you from the analysis division to a standard combat unit. Here's your reassignment order and information on your subordinates. Understood. Shino accepted the documents, slipping the reassignment letter into his pouch before glancing through his team members' profiles. Inoichi had already mentioned this to him, so he wasn't surprised. Leaving the intelligence division to take on a genin squad wasn't a big deal. A couple of missions a month, then plenty of time to slack off. Or so he thought, until he saw 3 very familiar names. Kurenai Yuhi, Might Guy, Genma Shiranui. Wait. These 3 were put together. That's not right. Wasn't Might Guy and Genma Shiranui's teammate supposed to be Ebisu? And weren't they from a different graduating class? Leaves need the guidance of their predecessors to grow strong, just as the will of fire is passed down through generations. It's time for you to guide the next generation of Konoha shinobi. Hiruzen didn't seem inclined to explain his reasoning further. Instead, he simply delivered a speech about the will of fire. Understood, Lord Hokage. I will ensure they receive proper instruction. Suppressing his doubts, Shino adjusted his posture and responded with due seriousness. Satisfied with his response, Hiruzen gave a final instruction. Report to the Jonin waiting area tomorrow morning, then head to Training Ground 4 to meet your team. Dismissed. Leaving the Hokage Tower, Shino exchanged greetings with a few familiar ninja before heading toward the Yamanaka clan's district. Halfway home, a mechanical voice suddenly echoed in his mind. Beep, system repair complete. Database reorganization complete. Energy absorption progress, 100%. System dormancy ended. Career trait system activated. Personal panel unlocked. Scan function unlocked. Trait extraction, gift, copy, upgrade, and removal functions unlocked. Career binding complete. Bound career, Shinobi. Complete career tasks and significant events to earn chances for trait extraction, gift, copy, upgrade, and removal. Newcomer pack activated. Trait extraction X3, gift X1. Shino's steps faltered briefly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before he quickly masked it. On the way home, he picked up a quick meal from a roadside stall, just like any other evening. Once inside his house, he formed the Tori seal and pressed a hand against the floor. A translucent blue barrier shimmered to life, enveloping the room. The intricate seals inscribed upon it pulsed faintly, completely isolating the interior from the outside world. Standing in the middle of the living room, Shino's expression shifted several times before he finally let out a long breath and settled down at the tea table. For years, he had imagined screaming in frustration at the system that took 19 years to activate. He had envisioned laughing or even crying, venting all the pent-up resentment and anticipation in one outburst. But perhaps those emotions had been worn away over time. Now that the moment had finally come, he found himself far calmer than expected. Host: Shino Yamanaka. Career: Shinobi. Activated traits: Transmigrator Red, Yin Release Master, Purple, Handsome, Blue, Slightly Skilled, Green. Inactive traits: None. Trait extraction: 3. Trait gift: 1. Transmigrator Red, as a soul from another world, your mental and spiritual strength, growth rate, and potential are greatly enhanced. Yin Release Master Purple, years of dedicated study and training have granted you near-perfect mastery over multiple Yin release techniques. Learning, refining, modifying, and creating Yin release jutsu is significantly more efficient. Yin release jutsu activation speed, power, and effectiveness are greatly increased. Resistance to Yin release techniques is also substantially boosted. Handsome Blue, blessed by the world, you were born with striking looks, an innate charm, and heightened appeal to the opposite sex. Slightly skilled Green, years of delving into the minds of others have given you extensive knowledge and experience. Your memory, learning speed, and proficiency in various jutsu types are slightly improved. All those years of grinding weren't in vain. A grin tugged at Shino's lips as he read through his traits. Without hesitation, he activated his first trait extraction. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 2, Clap your hands and call it out. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the white tier trait, Burrower, the black tier trait, Open-minded, and the purple tier trait, Call it out. Burrower White enhances stealth effects and movement speed in specific covert actions, but significantly reduces personal presence and charisma. Open-minded Black greatly increases the likelihood of suffering head injuries, significantly decreases skull durability and recovery speed, and slightly raises the chance of fatal damage. Call it out. Purple allows for precise chakra control, enabling the user to forego complex hand seals and activate mastered jutsu simply by clapping their hands and calling it out. Drastically improves chakra control and jutsu execution speed. What kind of nonsense is this? Yamanaka Shino frowned deeply. But he never imagined it would be this bizarre. Aside from the last trait, whose effects seemed somewhat useful despite the odd name, the first two were downright terrible. Burrower. Using this meant completely losing any hope of a romantic life in Konoha. And open-minded. It was literally about getting holes in his head. Is this trait meant to kill me? Shino's mind raced as he glanced at the trait gifting option from his newbie pack. Maybe one day, if he made an enemy, he could gift this trait to them. A pure debuff like this. Perhaps placing it on an enemy was the correct way to use it. After a few moments of scattered thoughts, Shino finally activated the purple tier trait Call it out. The next second, an indescribable clarity flooded his mind. It was as if his entire chakra network had been imprinted in his consciousness, every pathway and node visible down to the smallest detail. Each thread of chakra was now as responsive as his own limbs, completely within his grasp. All the jutsu he had trained extensively with. They now felt like second nature. He no longer needed complex seals. Just a simple guiding motion was enough to unleash them. Shino formed a single-handed ram seal and pointed at the training puppet in the corner of his room. In an instant, the lifeless puppet twitched to life, stretched its limbs, and executed a fluid display of taijutsu techniques. Seal simplification, one-handed seals. This is the perfect tool for ambush tactics. Shino muttered in admiration before continuing to test other jutsu. The Yamanaka clan's secret techniques required unique variations of the hare and rooster hand seals. These seals helped channel yin release energy, allowing for faster activation of their signature jutsu. While functionally effective, they were too obvious. Any enemy familiar with the Yamanaka techniques would instantly recognize the seals and move swiftly to evade. After all, the Yamanaka's jutsu targeted the soul itself. Without absolute certainty of success, failure meant a delayed soul return, and in that vulnerable moment, even a child could end their life. Now that he could abandon the clan's signature hand seals, his jutsu would become far harder to anticipate or counter. After half a day of testing various jutsu, Shino formed a Rasengan in his palm. Feeling the dense, high-speed rotating chakra sphere, he couldn't help but grin. Every jutsu he frequently used could now be executed with one-handed or simplified seals, doubling his activation speed. Some of his more advanced jutsu could even be used with the clap and call it out method. Even for jutsu he wasn't fully proficient in, while full simplification wasn't possible, the casting speed and precision had still improved dramatically. In the high-paced battles of the ninja world, even a fraction of a second could determine victory or defeat. Shino had already been one of the stronger Jonin in Konoha. Now that his execution speed had doubled, his combat effectiveness would skyrocket. I wonder if I could take on a cage-level opponent now. No, calm down. I can't get cocky. Shino quickly adjusted his mindset, reminding himself not to end up like a certain dark-haired idiot who thought he could solo the world. After all, he didn't have Suigetsu as a human shield, Jugo and Karen as healers, or a legendary big brother who secretly had his back. If he got arrogant now, he might just end up dead. Besides, cage-level strength wasn't just about speed. It required experience, strategy, jutsu synergy, durability, reflexes, chakra reserves. There's still a long road ahead. But as long as I don't go charging into an enemy army, I should be fine for the Third Shinobi War. Shino sighed in relief, his nerves slightly easing at the thought. Having lived through the Second Shinobi War, he understood more than anyone just how brutal the battlefield was. It was a place soaked in blood and agony. A slaughterhouse where humanity was stripped away, leaving only killing and numbness. Even after all these years, the memories of that carnage still sent shivers down his spine. Shino formed a single-hand seal. Deep underground, in a hidden chamber within his residence, 5 shadow clones dispersed simultaneously. A crushing wave of exhaustion and mental fatigue flooded his body. Too tired to resist his instincts, Shino lazily disabled the barrier around his room, hastily scarfed down some dinner, and collapsed onto his soft bedding. That night, he slept like a rock. The next morning, the golden sunlight slowly burned away the early morning mist. Birds fluttered outside the window, chirping noisily on the branches. Shino groggily opened his eyes. He glanced at the clock on the wall, 10 o'clock, and yawned. His newfound sense of security had allowed him to sleep in for the first time in ages. One moment of relaxation and my biological clock's already out of whack. Stretching lazily, he washed up while re-examining the system's functions. The system had clearly stated that new trait draws, gifts, copies, upgrades, and removals could be earned by completing career missions or major career-related events. For a Konoha Jonin like him, the former was straightforward. But as for major career events, would that mean participating in the Shinobi War? Witnessing major historical moments? Theater-level events? Whichever it was, they all sounded dangerous as hell. Shino finished fastening his ninja gear and stepped out the door. For now, he decided to put world-changing events on hold. The first thing he wanted to test: the drop rates of normal mission rewards. And his subordinates, who had been waiting all morning, were about to find out just how much stronger their captain had become. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 3. Open-minded, here we go. The streets of Konoha near noon were lively as ever, bathed in warm sunlight with a steady stream of pedestrians coming and going. Yamanaka Shino strolled along, nibbling on a red bean chestnut yokon he had bought, making his way toward the Jonin standby station. His gaze occasionally swept over the merchants, civilians, and shinobi passing by. Ordinary villagers rarely had any traits above their heads. Even when they did, they were mostly white or green, nothing particularly useful. In contrast, shinobi had a much higher chance of possessing traits, but even then, not all of them did. The majority were just blank. No matter the world, the number of ordinary people always outweighs the extraordinary, Shino mused, tossing the yokon wrapper into a trash bin just as he reached the entrance of the Jonin standby station. Then, out of nowhere, a 3-seater wooden couch shot out of the station's front door with a deafening whoosh. Before he could even process what was happening, a powerful surge of chakra erupted from within the building. Boom! The explosion shattered every window in the station, sending glass flying. A massive crack, over 3 meters deep, split the ground from the doorway, and even the walls showed signs of collapse. In the blink of an eye, the entire Jonin standby station had turned into a condemned ruin. A moment later, a basic wind release technique swept through, quickly dispersing the dust and revealing the 2 figures still standing inside, locked in a fierce standoff. Uzumaki Kushina and Shimura Danzo. Shing! 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 A series of sharp slicing sounds filled the air as 3 masked root shinobi appeared behind Danzo in an instant, clad in standard Anbu attire. They took a combat stance, ready to strike at Kushina. Shino narrowed his eyes and moved without hesitation, appearing at Kushina's back in a flash. He wasn't alone. Joining him were Akamichi Choza and Akamichi Dodo from the Akamichi clan, Nara Suzaku from the Nara clan, Inazuka, and Kurama Sound from the Kurama clan. As for the other Jonin who had been in the standby station just moments ago, whether out of fear of Danzo's authority as the Hokage's advisor or simply not wanting to get caught in high-level political strife, they had all disappeared without a trace. Shimura Danzo. I've already made myself clear, I will never hand over the Uzumaki clan's sealing techniques to you. With allies at her back, Kushina's already fiery aura burned even hotter. Hearing this, Shino immediately understood the situation. No wonder the Ino-Shika Cho clans had gathered behind her. Even the head of the Kurama clan was standing on her side. Danzo had touched a nerve, he had crossed the line of what the shinobi clans could tolerate. An unstable Jinchuriki who can't control her emotions is nothing but a disaster waiting to happen. I will petition Hiruzen to have you undergo training under root. Danzo's icy gaze was devoid of any emotion. He didn't spare Shino, Choza, Sound, or the others a single glance. Having delivered his ultimatum, he turned and started walking away. Kushina looked momentarily stunned. Even Choza and the others seemed taken aback by how easily he was leaving. Shino hadn't witnessed the entire conflict, so he couldn't determine Danzo's true objective. But given how quickly the old schemer was backing off, there was no way this was simply about obtaining the Uzumaki clan's sealing techniques. It wasn't even about bringing Kushina under Root's control. After all, even if Hiruzen had lost his mind, there was no way he'd let Danzo get his hands on the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Shino didn't know exactly what Danzo was plotting, but one thing was certain, whatever it wasn't anything good. Not before, and definitely not now. System, gift the open-minded trait to Shimura Danzo. A dark, shadowy glow, visible only to Shino, shot forward and sank into Danzo's body in an instant. Danzo, mid-stride, suddenly felt a chill run down the back of his head. He chalked it up to the intense hostility emanating from Kushina and the others, completely oblivious to the real source of the creeping sensation. Crack. A wooden support beam from the standby station's roof suddenly gave way with a sharp snap, sending debris crashing down. In that split second, Shino and the others instinctively used the body flicker technique to dodge. The 3 root operatives following Danzo reacted quickly as well, leaping away before the dust settled. But when the smoke cleared, they exchanged glances, only to realize Danzo was gone. Panic surged through them as they immediately began digging through the debris. Holy crap, this thing is that powerful! Shino's heart pounded in excitement and shock. The effects of the black trait were insane. He had just applied open-minded to Danzo, and the man was already buried alive. Ha 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 ha. Serves him right. People who do nothing but evil never meet good ends. Kushina laughed loudly, hands on her hips, thoroughly enjoying the sight of Danzo's subordinates struggling to unearth their battered leader. By the time they finally dragged him out, his robes were in tatters, his head was bleeding, and he looked absolutely miserable. Dazed and dizzy, Danzo instinctively circulated his chakra to check for injuries. Just as he had activated the body flicker technique earlier, his leg had inexplicably cramped, causing the collapsing beam to smash straight into his head. If not for the chakra he had managed to channel in time to protect himself, he might not have survived. Was it a side effect of the Sharingan transplant? A chakra deficiency causing muscle misfires? Sensing no real anomalies in his body, he could only attribute the mishap to his transplanted Sharingan. Ignoring Kushina's gleeful taunts, Danzo signaled to his subordinates. After a quick patch-up, they hoisted him onto their backs and swiftly retreated to the route base. Shino watched them leave, deep in thought. Name: Shimura Danzo. Occupation: Konoha Shinobi. Traits: 3 Tomo Sharingan, blue Wind Release Mastery, blue Mind Manipulation Specialist, blue Sealing Expertise, green Ruthless Schemer, white Heartless, white Open-Minded, black. In terms of sheer number of traits, Danzo had the most Shino had ever seen. Especially those unrelated to combat. Mind Manipulation Specialist controlled thoughts, Sealing Expertise controlled actions, Ruthless Schemer sacrificed social bonds for higher success rates, and Heartless lowered his moral baseline while increasing intimidation. With all these effects stacked together, no wonder Root had managed to run rampant in Konoha for decades without being toppled. What a beautiful day. Ah, thanks for the backup, everyone. Kushina stretched, flashing a bright, playful smile, completely different from the furious red-hot habanero from moments ago. No need for formalities. Kurama-san gave a respectful nod before turning to leave with practiced grace, maintaining the dignity of a clan leader. He had only backed Kushina because Danzo had threatened the authority of shinobi clans. If Danzo had chosen another angle of attack, Sound would have left long ago. Kushina didn't seem to mind his distant attitude. She turned to exchange a few words with Choza and the others before suddenly slapping Shino on the shoulder with a wide grin. Piggy, long time no see. 7 comments 0 vote. Download the app for greater interaction. You can chat with me about my writing experience apart from the comments section. Jigsaw. Download app now. Chapter 4, A Fateful Connection. I've told you so many times before, the title of Ino Shika Cho is only inherited by the main family line. TN. In Japanese, Ino means wild boar. Yamanaka Shino looked at Uzumaki Kushina with an exasperated expression. Piggy, what kind of ridiculous nickname was that? He was a full-grown man, male through and through, with a clear preference for women. He wasn't part of the Yamanaka clan's main lineage, nor was he some boar-riding warrior. How did he end up with a nickname like Piggy? Well, it's your fault for being so cute when you were little. You looked just like a girl, it was an easy mistake to make. Kushina giggled as she recalled the amusing memory, her laughter growing even brighter. Yeah, and I bet you were the only one who ever made that mistake. Shino rolled his eyes, looking utterly speechless. Back when Kushina transferred into the academy, he had been one of the few students who didn't mock her for her bright red hair during introductions. But by the time their first class had ended, she had already run up to him, asking where the girls' restroom was and whether he could go with her. Clearly, she had mistaken his overly delicate features as a child for those of a girl. Seeing the 8-year-old Kushina standing there, embarrassed and flustered, Shino, who had the mind of an adult, couldn't bear to let her suffer any further humiliation. So, without a word, he got up and led the way. Thinking back now, their first meeting was nothing short of fate playing tricks on them. Hee, Shino, what brings you to the Jonin standby station today? Kushina clasped her hands behind her back, a hint of anticipation on her face. Ahem. I've been transferred to the regular forces as a squad leader. Shino retrieved a scroll from his ninja pouch, containing his reassignment orders. Noticing that today's officer on duty, Nara Suzaku, was looking in his direction, he casually tossed the scroll over. Huh. That's great. That means we'll be seeing each other more often. Yeah. We'll catch up later. My 3 poor subordinates have been waiting for me all morning. You just got here, and you're already leaving. HMPH, fine, I'll let you off this time. But you'd better report in early tomorrow. Report in. Sure. See you tomorrow. Taking in the sight of the standby station, now reduced to rubble, Shino noticed Kushina suddenly stiffening, counting on her fingers, probably calculating how much she would have to pay in damages. Not wanting to stick around for that conversation, he quickly waved to Akamichi Choza before vanishing in a flicker. Kanahagakure's 4th training ground. The autumn sun cast a gentle warmth over the training field, illuminating the sweat-drenched figures of Might Guy and Shiranui Genma as they tirelessly honed their taijutsu and shuriken skills. Nearby, 10-year-old Yuhi Kurenai sat atop a tree stump used for kunai practice, swinging her legs idly. Listening to the grunts of her new teammates as they trained, along with the distant sounds of explosions from the 3rd training ground's combat exercises, she let out a long sigh. Her first year after graduation had been a disaster. One of her teammates had quit being a ninja, forcing her into a dull role in logistics. Now, she was finally reassigned to a new team, relieved that her new teammates were not only familiar faces but also determined and strong-willed, people who wouldn't give up on being shinobi so easily. But just as she thought things were looking up, their assigned Jonin leader turned out to be a no-show, leaving them waiting all morning for their first team meeting. Sure, the orders only stated to gather at the 4th training ground in the morning, without a specific time. But it was already noon. Why did her ninja career have to be so full of misfortune? As she was lost in thought, a faint fragrance drifted in on the autumn breeze, light and delicate, like an orchid scent. Before she could figure out what kind of flower it was, the ground beneath them suddenly began to rise. Might Guy and Shiranui Genma, ever alert, immediately noticed the disturbance and leapt back. But before Kurenai could jump down from the stump, a monstrous serpent with a head at least 3 meters wide burst through the earth, slithering up from underground. The sheer size of the creature, like a living mountain, sent waves of terror crashing over Kurenai. A deep, primal fear gripped her body, paralyzing her completely. Her every nerve screamed at her to move, but she couldn't. She didn't even dare to breathe for fear of drawing the serpent's attention. Unfortunately, fate was unkind. The massive head of the snake lifted slightly, its cold, slit-pupiled eyes locking onto her. Then, in an instant, it lunged. The overwhelming stench from its gaping maw filled her nostrils, and for a split second, she could almost taste death itself. Move! Move, damn it! Kurenai's mind screamed at her, and at the last possible moment, she broke free from her paralysis, her limbs surging with desperate strength. But the snake was too fast. The gaping maw was upon her before she could dodge. Just as she braced for the inevitable, a loud battle cry rang out. Ah-da-a. A green blur shot in from the side, slamming into the snake's head with a powerful kick, knocking it 2 feet off course. Kurenai barely escaped by a hair's breadth, the giant mouth snapping shut just beside her. Boom! The missed attack sent a cloud of dust billowing into the air as the serpent hissed in frustration, its tail lashing the ground without any sign of injury. Genma knew they had no chance against such a monster. Without hesitation, he grabbed Kurenai and sprinted away, hurling a series of smoke bombs behind him. Guy! Run! Might Guy, seeing Genma's retreat, wasted no time following after them. Kurenai, still dazed from the brush with death, suddenly found her mind clearer than ever. Head for the 3rd training ground. There are Jonin conducting exams there. Does anyone have a red signal flare? Quick! Got it! Guy reached for his ninja pouch. But before he could even pull the flare out, the scene around them shattered like glass. The 3 of them, still running full tilt, nearly crashed headfirst into a massive tree. Regaining their balance, they looked around in utter confusion. The snake was gone. The training ground showed no signs of damage. Then, clap, clap, clap. Applause echoed from the shadows. Stepping out from beneath a tree, clad in a black combat suit and Jonin vest, was Yamanaka Shino. Patience, courage, teamwork, and sound judgment under pressure. Congratulations, you've passed the test. I'm your new squad leader, Yamanaka Shino. I look forward to working with you. Youth truly rewards those who give it their all. I am Might Guy, and I will give my all to you, sensei. Despite the terrifyingly real illusion, Guy grinned, flashing his signature sparkling white teeth. I'm Shiranui Genma. Pleased to meet you. Genma dusted himself off and bowed respectfully. Yuhi Kurenai. Please guide us well, sensei. As she greeted her new mentor, Kurenai mentally screamed. Springing a test on them without warning like this. That was just cruel. She had genuinely thought she was going to die. But, what an incredible genjutsu. 7 comments 0 vote. Chapter 5. The sun is warm, and the breeze is gentle. Since genjutsu was her primary field of study, Kurenai Yuhi had a far deeper understanding of it than Might Guy or Genma Shiranui. And the more she understood, the more she realized just how terrifyingly powerful the illusion Shino Yamanaka had just cast truly was. Using a faint, unique fragrance to ensnare his targets without them even realizing it, he had seamlessly pulled them into a genjutsu that manipulated their senses. Within a single breath, he had interfered with their sense of smell, sight, touch, taste, and hearing, without them even noticing they had fallen under an illusion. This level of deception alone was already beyond the reach of an ordinary A-rank genjutsu. And then there was the chilling, irrational killing intent, the kind that made it feel as though a real, massive serpent were coiling around them. It didn't just target the 5 senses, it struck something deeper, something primal, humanity's most instinctive perception of danger buried deep within the genes. But most importantly, it was cast on multiple targets simultaneously. He had managed to manipulate the senses of all 3 of them at once, keeping their perceptions perfectly aligned without any discrepancies or inconsistencies between them. This wasn't just an A-rank genjutsu, it was a complex, multi-layered illusion woven around an A-rank core. The level of control and the sheer effectiveness, it was likely on par with an S-rank genjutsu. And their squad leader had used such a powerful technique, on 3 rookie genin. When Kurenai considered it that way, she felt even more indignant. You look like you're thinking something very disrespectful. Shino Yamanaka narrowed his eyes slightly as he leaned in, meeting Kurenai's ruby-red gaze head-on. And no. Of course not. Kurenai averted her eyes, vehemently denying the silent complaints she had just been making about her squad leader in her mind. Shino smirked. Seeing how easily the 3 rookies had been distracted by his sudden attack and smooth talking, he knew they had completely forgotten about his morning-long absence. Kids really were easy to fool. As he turned to leave the training grounds, he called back to them, since you passed the test, we should celebrate the formation of our team. I'll treat you all to some skewers for lunch. Let's go. I've decided. I'll walk to the restaurant on my fingertips. If I can't do it, I'll do 2,000 kicks as punishment. Might Guy shouted enthusiastically. Sensei said skewers, not barbecue. That means our destination is Sanmaya. Genma Shiranui, a Sanbon clamped between his lips, corrected him lazily. Huh. You mean the restaurant run by the Ino-Shikacho clans? I heard their prices are insanely high. Just one plate of venison costs 500 ryo. Kurenai's eyes lit up. She quietly decided to momentarily forget about appearances and eat to her heart's content. After all, she had just endured quite a fright. They seemed to have decent mental resilience. Hearing the three rookies chatting and laughing behind him, Shino smiled slightly. Their talent was undeniable. Might Guy, the most gifted of the three, possessed three special traits: Burning Youth Blue, Extreme Recovery Blue, and Thick-Browed Kappa White. Burning Youth gave him an extraordinary level of self-discipline and an indomitable will. Extreme Recovery allowed his body to recover more quickly when pushed to its limits, reducing the risk of hidden injuries. And while Thick-Browed Kappa lowered his natural charm and chakra stability, it significantly enhanced his focus and the effectiveness of his taijutsu training. With these three traits complementing each other, his potential far surpassed that of most shinobi in Konoha. Kurenai came next, with two notable traits: Strong Mental Force Blue and Illusionist Green. The first trait increased her mental strength and capacity, while the second enhanced the potency of her genjutsu. If she developed her abilities properly, she might be able to avoid the infamous "Itachi humiliates Kurenai" moment in the future. As for Genma Shiranui, he only had one trait, influenced by Pierce Blue. Its effect was simple: when learning under skilled guidance, he could significantly accelerate his growth and raise his own limits. Though he had fewer traits than the others, in practical terms, his potential might not be any weaker than Kurenai's. With their talent and mindset, Shino was certain, if he put in even a little effort as their mentor, and none of them died prematurely like in the original timeline, their future achievements would far surpass what was originally expected of them. But as he looked at the 10-year-old Might Guy, the 11-year-old Kurenai, and the 12-year-old Genma, he let out a sigh. When he had watched the anime in his past life, all he had seen was passion and camaraderie. But after spending more than a decade surviving in this blood-soaked shinobi world, all he could see now was cruelty. 11 and 12-year-old children. Back in his previous life, they wouldn't have even finished elementary school. But in Konoha, kids that age were already being thrown onto the battlefield to fight and kill. This damn place, there's nothing to love about it. Shino scoffed to himself. He was long past the age of youthful idealism, the kind that made people rage against the world's injustices. But even now, he couldn't help but ask himself, should he be doing something about this? Mencius once said, "When poor, cultivate oneself; when prosperous, aid the world." Before, he hadn't had the strength to go against the shinobi world's brutal system. He had been forced to go with the flow, never daring to step out of line. But now, he had a system. 500 ryo for a plate of venison. That means a single meal would cost as much as several D-rank missions. Might Guy gasped, hopping forward on one hand while using the other to count the potential expenses. Forget it. I've heard before that if you don't order the most expensive items, the average price per person is about 3,000 ryo. It's roughly 3 times the cost of barbecue T3,000. That's daylight robbery. Coming from a poor family, Might Guy nearly lost his balance in shock, almost crashing headfirst into the ground. Kurenai stole a glance at Shino, who had been quiet for a while now. Seeing his serious expression, she assumed he hadn't realized how pricey Sanmaya was and had only wanted to treat his team to something nice. Now that he knew the actual cost, she figured he must be just as shocked as they were. The kind-hearted girl decided to temporarily forgive him for the earlier scare he had given her. Trying to ease the awkward atmosphere, she hesitantly spoke up. Sensei. Actually, I think ramen is really delicious too. Shino was momentarily stunned, but when he realized what she was implying, he burst into laughter. Reaching out, he ruffled the young girl's hair. Kurenai's face flushed red as she wrinkled her nose in embarrassment, quickly fixing her hair. At that moment, Shino made up his mind. He would do something. Not for some lofty, hollow ideal like the will of fire. Not for some impossible dream of world peace. But simply because today, the sun was warm, the breeze was gentle, and the people he had met were kind. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 6, The King of Knowledge. No one knows more than me. The food at Sanmaya was even more delicious than Kurenai Yuhi, Might Guy, and Genma Shiranui had imagined. And when they found out that Yamanaka Shino actually owned a 40% share of the restaurant, not only allowing him to eat for free but also earning him a significant dividend every month, the three of them wasted no time in stuffing themselves to their heart's content. Even Kurenai, the most refined among them, ended up eating so much that she could barely sit up straight. She couldn't help but marvel at the situation. She had actually worried that a Konoha Jonin, who was mean enough to use an ultimate-level genjutsu combo on Jonin, might be struggling financially. She was truly too naive. Sensei, when are we going to start taking on missions? Genma Shiranui asked after finishing his meal, eager to know what lay ahead for their team. Kurenai and Guy also turned their expectant gazes toward Yamanaka Shino. Both Genma and Guy had been inactive for quite some time since Ebisu transferred to a desk job. With their wallets practically empty, they had been living a rather frugal life. Kurenai, having worked in logistics for nearly a year, had managed to save up a decent amount. But she had hardly gone on any real missions before being forced into the logistics team, so she was just as eager to finally experience some action. Seeing their excited expressions, and wanting to test the systems, drop rate, through missions, Shino naturally didn't delay. We'll head to the mission office in a bit. The flames of youth are about to ignite once more. Might Guy leapt up from his seat, brimming with energy. But before he could even strike a signature pose, he clutched his overstuffed stomach and bent over slightly. Seeing Genma's exasperated look, Guy remained unfazed and quickly added, "The path of youth may have its occasional setbacks, but worry not. This afternoon, I will put in 200% effort and sweat." Yeah, Genma sighed. Even after 2 years of working together, he still had no idea how to deal with Guy's personality. Kurenai propped her chin up with one hand, smiling as she watched the two bicker. Somehow, she had a feeling that the days ahead would be anything but dull. About 10 kilometers southwest of Konoha, in the village of Nakayoshi, a massive wild boar, easily weighing over 1,000 pounds and resembling a walking fortress, rampaged through the area. Its body was riddled with kunai, though none had pierced deeper than an inch. With bloodshot eyes, it charged madly in all directions. Walls and makeshift traps along its path shattered as if they were made of paper. Might Guy and Genma Shiranui engaged it from the front, drawing its attention while Kurenai prepared to cast her jutsu. After several attempts, she finally managed to trap the boar in an illusion, demonic illusion, false surroundings technique. With its vision distorted, the boar was lured straight into a pre-dug pit. The moment it fell in, over a dozen steel spears embedded in the pit impaled its massive body. It struggled for over 10 minutes, letting out agonized roars before finally going still. Exhausted, the three of them wiped the sweat from their foreheads and let out a collective sigh of relief. Standing on a nearby rooftop, observing the entire battle without intervening, was Yamanaka Shino. He carefully noted the strengths and weaknesses each of them had displayed during the mission. Just as he was about to give them some feedback, a familiar system notification sounded in his mind. Beep, D-rank profession mission, eliminate the wild boar destroying farmland, completed. Reward, none. First time completion of a profession mission, granted 2 trait extraction and 1 trait gifting opportunity. Shino paused for a moment. He hadn't expected the system to consider the mission complete just by killing the boar, even before they returned to Konoha to report it. And since it was his first time completing a profession mission, he had been directly awarded 2 trait draws and 1 gifting opportunity. As for the lack of rewards for a standard D-rank mission, it wasn't surprising. After all, probabilities were just that, luck-based. Besides, it was highly likely that rewards scaled with mission difficulty. If a D-rank mission, one that mostly involved traveling and barely took an afternoon, could reliably yield rewards, then in less than a month, Shino would be strong enough to drag the Sage of Six Paths out of the Pure Land for a fight. This damn system doesn't even have a proper manual. Shino grumbled internally about how unhelpful the system was. Then, looking at the 2 trait draws available on his status panel, he decisively chose to use them. Congratulations! You have obtained the blue trait, Memory Palace, and the white trait, Fragile but Tenacious. Memory Palace Blue, a combination of talent and training, enables optimal brain development. Allows proficient use of the Memory Palace technique, increasing learning speed, speed reading ability, and memory retention. Fragile but Tenacious White. Until your body reaches Jonin level durability, you have an increased chance of encountering powerful enemies and life-threatening situations. However, you also have a slightly higher chance of breaking through in battle and surviving. 1 blue, 1 white, not bad. Shino reviewed the traits, descriptions and immediately activated Memory Palace. Whether for learning or research, memory was always a valuable asset. As for Fragile but Tenacious, for someone already past the newbie phase, it wasn't particularly useful. If anything, it was the kind of ability that only protagonists blessed by fate could survive with during their early struggles. Otherwise, no matter how high the breakthrough or survival rate, it wouldn't mean much when enemies and crises kept coming non-stop. Detected that the blue trait, Memory Palace, can be fused with the green trait, Slightly Skilled. Would you like to proceed with fusion? Fusion. After a brief hesitation, Shino chose to proceed. This was his first time encountering trait fusion, but since both traits related to learning and memory, there was little risk of a bad outcome. Suddenly, a flood of memories surged through his mind like a tide. Scenes flashed past like a fast-forwarded slideshow. Even memories from his previous life, going back to when he was just 4 or 5 years old, became crystal clear. Kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, university. A vast sea of memories was neatly categorized and stored within his mind's Memory Palace. Among them, every detail he had ever learned about Naruto, from watching the anime to reading various forum discussions, was carefully filed away in its own section. Once his past life memories were sorted, his current life memories followed suit. Even those he had extracted from others' minds while working at the interrogation unit were now systematically archived. As the mental turbulence settled, the system's notification rang once more. Fusion complete. Congratulations! You have obtained the blue trait, King of Knowledge, Ninja World Edition. King of Knowledge, Ninja World Edition Blue, a perfect application of the Memory Palace technique, grants near infinite memory capacity. The combined knowledge of 2 lifetimes provides vast experience, secret information about the ninja world, and mastery of various ninjutsu and techniques. Learning speed, speed reading ability, and memory retention are significantly enhanced. Damn! This is a straight-up cheat code. Feeling the clarity of his mind, Shino's eyes lit up with excitement. Dash 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 dash. PLs drop some power stones. Read more than +100 chapters and support me on Patreon. Patreon. Jigsaw. 11 comments 0 vote. Chapter 7. EH. For a transmigrator, having foreknowledge of the story is the greatest advantage. And if one can remember key details of the plot, they can easily obtain things that ordinary people could struggle decades for and still fail to achieve. Shino had been in the world of Naruto for 19 years now. Right after transmigrating, he had recorded as much of the storyline as he could remember, using sketches and phonetic notes. Even now, he still occasionally went through them. But even back then, his memory was far from perfect. Most of what he recalled were the major plot points, making it difficult to retain the intricate details of any given event. For example, he knew that Danzo had once deemed the Akatsuki a threat and orchestrated Yahiko's death, which directly led to Nagato's descent into darkness. But as for how exactly he had pulled it off and whether others were involved, his memory from watching the series was too distant and blurry to recall the specifics. Looks like I'm going to be busy for a while. Shino's lips curled into an unconcealable smirk. The blue trait he had just acquired, King of Knowledge, Ninja World Edition, had a somewhat ridiculous name. But to him, its value far exceeded that of the previous purple trait he had obtained. As long as he made good use of it, the benefits would be immeasurable. Sensei, the client is here. From beside a large pit trap, Kurenai Yuhi stood on her toes, waving her hand as she called out to him from a distance. The crisp voice of the young girl pulled Shino out of his delightful thoughts. He leapt down from the rooftop and landed beside the massive pit trap. After having the client sign the mission contract for confirmation, he signaled to his 3 young students, who had just finished collecting their kunai, wires, and shuriken, to start heading back. The 4 of them moved swiftly through the dense forest, taking the shortest route back toward Konoha. While they traveled, Shino took the opportunity to point out the mistakes and flaws that had been exposed during their mission. First and foremost, the biggest blunder, the 3 of them had failed to gather sufficient intelligence from the client before rushing off to locate their target. Secondly, upon spotting the target, they had neglected to make careful observations, which led them to misjudge its defensive capabilities. The wild boar had several shallow wounds on its hide, likely caused by villagers using hatchets and arrows. Given that adult villagers, hardened by years of farm work, could swing their tools with considerable force, these marks should have been used to gauge the boar's durability, allowing them to devise a more suitable combat strategy. If they had done so, they wouldn't have wasted time stabbing at the boar with kunai, only to enrage it and nearly get injured themselves. Lastly, a ninja's means of completing a mission are not limited to direct combat. Genma Shiranui carried more than 10 potent hallucinogenic smoke bombs in his ninja pouch, while Kurenai had a potent anesthetic in her small medical kit. Not to mention, the wastelands outside Nakayoshi village were home to many poisonous plants and venomous insects. They weren't illiterate villagers relying solely on the experience of their ancestors to survive. Catching a few venomous bugs or picking some poisonous herbs and mixing a simple concoction based on their academy textbooks could have easily felled the boar. Hell, even an elephant wouldn't have stood a chance if they had done it right. Hearing Shino's critique, Kurenai, Genma, and Might Guy all wore embarrassed expressions. The excitement of successfully completing their mission dissipated instantly. Shino, seeing their dejected faces, knew that scolding alone wouldn't be effective when teaching kids. Praise had to be mixed in as well. Shifting his tone, he acknowledged their strengths. One thing worth commending is your excellent teamwork. You all trusted your comrades fully and, even on your first mission together, made good use of each other's strengths. Your adaptability was also impressive. When the initial plan failed, you quickly improvised and made use of the dried reservoir to create a deep pit trap. And finally, I appreciate your efforts to minimize unnecessary losses for the client, ensuring their property remained intact as much as possible. Overall, I'd say your performance was, well, satisfactory. Shino chuckled as he delivered his final verdict. Yeah. The 3 of them high-fived in celebration, silently vowing to perform even better on their next mission. After a moment of playful chatter, Kurenai, ever the observant one, steered the conversation back to their mission. Sensei, if it had been you as a genin back then, how would you have handled this mission? Obviously. I'd just take it out with a single jutsu. Come on, Genma just used a fire release technique, and all he did was singe some pig hair. There's no way a Jonin's jutsu could one-shot a boar that big. I'm from the Yamanaka clan. Controlling the boar to drown itself in a river or ram itself into a mountain wouldn't be difficult at all. That's such a sneaky technique. Ha ha ha. The four of them laughed and chatted all the way back, finally reaching Konoha under the cover of night. After grabbing a quick meal at the newly opened Ichiraku Ramen, they set a time to regroup the next day and then went their separate ways. As Shino walked toward the Yamanaka clan's compound, he noticed the lights were still on in his house from afar, and a question mark slowly formed in his mind. Forming a one-handed seal, he activated the Yamanaka clan's sensory jutsu. Immediately, he felt an immense chakra presence radiating like a blazing sun from inside his home, barely concealed under layers of suppressed energy. He instantly identified the visitor. There was only one person with such a unique chakra signature. If it wasn't the infamous, red-hot habanero, the nine-tails Jinchuriki, Uzumaki Kushina, then who else could it be? Bam! Clatter! A series of crashes echoed from inside the house. Noticing the intrusion, Kushina didn't even bother putting on her shoes. In a blur of motion, she flung open the door and leapt onto the outer wall. Her eyes locked onto Shino at the end of the street. Shino, I finally found you, ya know. Her words, filled with both excitement and grievance, sounded like the climax of a tragic romance drama where the heroine, after enduring endless hardships, finally reunites with her beloved. Shino shuddered violently, barely resisting the urge to turn and flee. This is bad. Why is the red-hot habanero talking like that? Soft rustling noises came from the houses on either side of the street. Clearly, the nosy clan members had heard the commotion and were quietly gathering to eavesdrop. Shino covered his face with one hand, swiftly activating the body flicker technique to drag Kushina inside. As he shut the door, he immediately activated a 5-layer anti-sensory barrier. He was certain, if he had hesitated for even a second, rumors would be flying by morning about him and the Uzumaki orphan being involved in some scandal. Kushina stumbled as she was pulled inside. Watching Shino skillfully set up a barrier, her tone shifted dramatically within just 3 syllables, from bewilderment to suspicion, and finally to alarm. Instinctively, she crossed her arms over her chest, putting on an exaggeratedly wary expression. But in her eyes, there was a faint glimmer of excitement and anticipation. Oh, for foo! Seeing her reaction, Shino felt like coughing up blood. PLs drop some power stones. Read more than +100 chapters and support me on Patreon. Patreon.com Jigsaw. 10 comments 0 vote. Chapter 8, how about we give Danzo a beating? Hey. What's with that look of disgust and disdain? Reeking of alcohol, Kushina dropped her arms from where she had been, crossing them over her chest, clearly dissatisfied. Sure, she was usually a bit rough around the edges, but come on. She had the looks, she had the figure, she was a proper beauty, all right. Did he really have to make that face? How much did you drink? Ignoring Kushina's protests, Yamanaka Shino swept his gaze across the living room, feeling more exasperated than he could put into words. The once pristine and tidy coffee table was now cluttered with empty instant ramen cups and scattered liquor bottles. Magazines and ninja scrolls were strewn haphazardly across the floor and couch. Even the small training puppets he used for ninjutsu practice, normally kept in pristine condition, had been mercilessly tossed aside after being used as playthings. Just a little bit. Kushina finally noticed the mess around her. The fog of alcohol in her brain cleared somewhat, and she shrank back, sneaking careful glances at Shino's expression. Wait, she hadn't even done anything crazy today. So how had the place ended up looking like this? If something's bothering you, don't just drown it in alcohol. It's not good for you. Seeing the uneasy look in her eyes, Shino swallowed back harsher words and opted for concern instead. They had known each other for years, long enough for him to understand her well. Kushina never touched alcohol, which meant something must have happened after her confrontation with Danzo that morning. Something bad enough to make her reach for a drink. Forming the Ram seal with one hand, Shino activated an advanced jutsu, an evolution of both the Mind Clone Switch technique and Mind Puppet Switch Cursed Seal technique, Mind Puppet Clone Jutsu. 5 humanoid puppets, each just over a foot tall, suddenly sprang to life, flipping upright in perfect synchronization before darting around the room, cleaning up the mess with impressive efficiency. The once filthy coffee table was soon spotless, and the scattered magazines and scrolls were neatly sorted back into their proper places. Kushina, now barefoot, eagerly scampered after the puppets, pretending to help. Watching her so diligently tidy up, one might almost think she was naturally hardworking. All right. Now spill it. What do you need from me? Watching her attempt to act cute and charming, Shino felt an inevitable sense of resignation. Shino-kun, let's talk about something. How about lending me 8 million ryo? Pretty please. Kushina's voice was sweet and coaxing, her demeanor shy and hesitant, completely unlike the fierce, hot-tempered red-hot habanero she had been earlier that day. Hold on. You just collected rent in July. It hasn't even been 3 months. You spent it all already. Shino's disbelief was written all over his face. When Uzumaki Mito passed away, she had left Kushina an incredibly generous inheritance. The 10-plus shops she owned on Konoha's commercial street alone brought in more than enough rent to keep Kushina living in luxury for years. How in the world had she managed to burn through all that money so quickly? I lent it to Tsunade. That gambling addict, you've got some real guts, huh? I didn't have a choice. Tsunade cried and told me she was starving, that she had no clothes, that she was practically dying. And you actually believed her? Ah, come on, Shino-kun, that bastard Danzo is the real villain here. He completely denied any responsibility for the damage to the Jonin standby quarters and forced me to cover all the rebuilding costs myself. Even the third sided with him. Kushina quickly glossed over the part about lending money to Tsunade and dove headfirst into ranting about the true source of her problems, Shimura Danzo. The third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, didn't escape her wrath either. Listening to her complaints, one would think she had absolutely nothing to do with the destruction of the standby quarters in the first place. Fine. 8 million, right? If you could spare a little extra so I can at least eat, that'd be even better. Listen, from now on, set aside some emergency funds when you collect rent. Plan your expenses better. And if someone asks you for money, at least check whether they actually need it for something important. Shino sighed as he stood up from the couch and walked over to a hidden compartment in his study. Kneeling obediently by the coffee table, Kushina watched him pull out 2 bank deposit slips from the Land of Fire's National Bank. Maybe it was the alcohol, but as Shino continued to nag, her mind drifted to memories of Uzumaki Mito. Her fingers trembled slightly as she accepted the 2 slips, each worth 5 million ryo. Shino noticed her dazed expression and waved a hand in front of her face. That extra 2 million. Use it to eat properly and buy yourself some nice clothes. And next time, don't take your frustration out on yourself. Like the old saying goes, if you're feeling angry, don't suffer alone. Make someone else suffer instead. He had barely finished speaking when he saw tears welling up in Kushina's eyes. Within seconds, fat drops were rolling down her cheeks. Handling emotional situations was not his strong suit. Panicking, he hastily grabbed a tissue and handed it to her. As she sat there, crying her heart out, Shino sighed. Searching for the right words, he finally suggested. If you really can't get over it, how about we sneak off and give Danzo a beating? I know how Root operates. If you don't want to be seen doing it, I can take care of him for you. Wah. Shino. Wah. I miss Mito. Kushina, who had initially been crying quietly, completely lost it at his words. All the pent-up frustration, all the loneliness, all the grief she had bottled up came pouring out at once. She tilted her head back and wailed, her face a mess of tears and snot. Ever since Mito had passed away, it had been so long since anyone had spoken to her like this. Because of her status as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, she was practically a prisoner. She couldn't